Today we're going to talk about how to start up a successful taxi business in Africa. More than 60% of people who start taxi business actually fail before the third year of starting the business. And this has made many people to think that the taxi business is not actually lucrative. Whereas Africa offers the best ingredients in the world that the business can actually flourish. You should remember that in every business that you fail, there are tons of people that succeed. I personally know people who have more than 200 taxis and have made more than 10 years in the business. Now, the main problem of taxi business is just the managerial skills, and many people tend to underestimate the taxi business because it looks very simple and only realize when they have failed. 4 years ago, I actually started the taxi business and only learned through the hard way. Today, looking back then, I wish I knew what I know today. My name is Asongwet Louis and you are watching Africa Today. Africa Today is a channel that is dedicated to investment and entrepreneurship in Africa, which are actually the pillars that are going to make Africa become an economic power. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I don't know what you're waiting for. Now in this video, we are going to look at critical managerial skills that people actually miss out when they start the taxi business. Just like any other business, the taxi business has technical facts. It has its own peculiarities that if you don't follow, you are going to fail. We're going to divide this video into 4 main parts. The first part will be talking about why you should do the taxi business. Now the second part will be how we're going to do the taxi business, which is actually divided into 3 main components. The third part will be talking about the monetary part of the taxi business, which is actually divided into the expenses that you are going to encounter in the taxi business and the profits that you are going to make. In the fourth part of this video, we'll be talking about how you can actually maximize the profits that were made in the third part and actually outstand and dominate any other competitor in the taxi business. We are going to start off with the reasons why you should do the taxi business in Africa right now. Africa actually has all the ingredients that are necessary for a taxi business to flourish. The main thing that investors in this business are actually missing are actually the managerial skills. Now, the first reason why you should start the taxi business in Africa is that Africa has less cars compared to the rest of the world. The Asian continent has more than 530 million cars. Europe has 405 million cars. North America, Canada, and Mexico have about 300 million cars. And Africa has just 30 million cars, though it has close to 20% of the world's population. Now, this is a very clear indicator that there is a lot of demand in the taxi business. Another reason why taxi business is going to do very well in Africa is that there is rapid urbanization in Africa right now. Now, Africa has the highest rate of urbanization. In the next 30 years, urbanization rate in Africa is going to reach 70%. That is, 70% of people living in Africa are going to live in cities. This implies that about 1.2 billion people will be living in cities. This actually means that the growth potential of the taxi business is only going to go up. Now, the next reason why you should start a taxi business in Africa is that the initial cost of starting a taxi business is very cheap. Now, unlike other businesses that you need to rent a place or whatever, the taxi business doesn't require any rent. You just need to simply buy a car and start up your business. This also means that you can actually start a taxi business without borrowing money from the bank, since it actually requires low capital. Unlike a mini manufacturing business where you need to buy machinery, you need to buy raw materials, you need to rent or build a structure, you need to pay lots of workers and all that. A taxi business, you just need to buy a vehicle, look for a driver, and you get going. And this actually means that most Africans can instead go into this business, since one of the main problems in Africa is actually lack of capital. So if you actually lack capital, the best place to start is a taxi business so that you can grow up your capital and expand to other businesses that require more capital. Another reason why you should do the taxi business is because the taxi business is passive income. Now, if you talk to rich people, they will tell you that one of the ways in which they use to grow capital or to make money is through passive income. Now, imagine yourself sleeping and your taxis are out there working money for you. Another reason why you should start up a taxi business rather than many other businesses is that you can easily scale the business. You can easily add 1 taxi, 2 taxis, 3 taxis, 4 taxis. And also, the other side, you can easily go out of the business. If you decide to go out of the business, you can easily sell the cars and you start up a different business if you like. So, looking at it very well, the risks are not very high in doing the taxi business. Another good reason why you should start a taxi business in Africa is that the very first day that you start that business, you can actually have income on that same day. It's not like other businesses where you need to say you are going to build up a community. People have to know your business. For example, if you started an article shop in a neighborhood, People in that neighborhood need to first of all know your business, need to observe you before start buying from you, or need to gain some trust in you before start buying from you or whatever. But for the taxi business, the same day you start a taxi business, you can actually start making money. The very first hour that taxi goes out to work, it brings you money. It starts registering your money. That's one of the good reasons why you should start up a taxi business. For this package to be complete, you need to also know the disadvantages that are involved in the taxi business. Everything is not always rosy all the time. But the good thing is, at the end of the video, you are going to know how to counteract all the negative, all the disadvantages of the taxi business. There is maintenance. If it's moving, you must maintain it. Another thing is theft. It's a valuable asset which can actually be taken away even by your own driver. Now, the next part of this video is actually talking about how to do the taxi business. We're actually getting into real business now. When it comes to this particular aspect, there are three important things that you need to know when starting up a taxi business. And the very first is your driver. You need to look for a driver ahead of time. Now, before you buy a taxi, it is important for you to have a good driver before you buy a taxi, because having a driver sometimes can be very difficult. I mean, a reliable driver. There are drivers all over the place, but having a reliable driver can be sometimes very challenging. That's why it's important for you to have a good driver before you buy a taxi. When you keep a taxi for 2 days without any activity, that already accounts for losses. Don't go and just say that, okay, no, you want to take a family member because you will not pay the family member or whatever. No, you need to look for a good driver and pay the driver for his job. You need to look for a good driver that is experienced. Now, when starting a taxi business, you don't need to go and look for somebody who is a novice. Imagine you are a novice and your driver is also a novice. Just because maybe the driver is a family member doesn't mean that you should look at that particular person to actually handle your business. Driving, first of all, for long hours is a very physical, demanding activity. And so you need to look for somebody who is already used to that activity, whose body is already adapted to that activity, and who knows details of the field. A good way to be sure that the driver is a good and honest driver, you need to ask for the contact number of his former bosses. Now, if he refuses to give you the contact number, or he doesn't want to give you the contact number, it means that he has something that is hiding. That's a very big red flag. If that guy is a crook, you are not going to change him. The next most important thing that you need to take note is obviously the car. Avoid buying old cars. Now, these old cars are just going to increase the frequency in which you go to the mechanics. It's going to increase the frequency in which you do maintenance and all that. So go for a car that is a bit new. You need to look for cars that are common in the country you intend to invest in. Buying cars that are not common in the country you're investing in is going to just bring you more problems. Don't go and buy cars for buying sake, or because you made a good deal, or because you are buying from a friend, or because you want to help a family member to buy their car, or because you just love a particular brand of car. No, you need to buy a car that is actually common in the country. For example, if you want to invest in taxi business in Nigeria, the most common cars that are there are the Toyota Corolla. In Ghana is the Toyota Yaris. In Cameroon is also the Toyota Yaris. In Kenya is the Toyota Ractis. The next thing that you need to look after when you want to buy a car for taxi business is actually the fuel consumption. Now, it's not only the popularity of the car that matters, also the economic part of it. How are you going to manage the car? Is the car actually consuming a lot? Those are questions that you need to ask when buying a car. But usually the cars that are used for taxi in these countries are usually efficient in fuel. The advantages of having cars that are readily available in the market is that you are easily going to sort out spare parts, and also mechanics are going to be very versed with the maintenance of such cars. Now, if you intend to make a fleet of taxis, ensure that all the taxis you buy are of the same brand and model. This is very important because if one taxi driver is ill, another driver can easily take his place and easily adapt to the car since it's the same car that he is using. Another advantage of making your fleet of taxis the same model is that when one car is totally destroyed or bad, it can be used as a source of spare parts to serve the other taxis. So this point is very critical. Now, the third thing is a manager. Now, many people actually fail in taxi business because they don't have a manager. Many people actually don't see the need of a manager. In fact, they don't even think of having a manager. I'm also a victim of that. I remember I made that same mistake when I started. I never even knew there was something like a manager of taxis or what. I was just managing these guys, and the thing gave me a lot of stress. I could not do any other thing. Now, one of the important things to you in particular is that the manager is going to lift a lot of stress from you in managing this business, because this business can be very stressful. If you are getting into the business without actually knowing all the details in the business, you can actually think that it's as easy as it sounds. Now, the manager has a lot of responsibilities. Some of them include renewing insurance of the taxis, taking the taxis to the garage. Under no circumstances should you allow your driver to take the taxi to the garage. That's a big no. Don't try it. I made this mistake when the driver always called me, "Hey, I'm having this problem. The car is..." I said, "Take it to the garage and send the bill to me." The driver maybe will not even go to the garage. Maybe there was no problem. They just create problems. Sometimes this driver, when they see that you don't know, they create faults. And that's one of the reasons why you cannot survive in this business, because the driver actually creates faults. And one of the responsibilities of the manager is that he has to ensure that the car makes the shortest possible time in the garage, because one day spent in the garage is a lot of money you are losing. One of the advantages of having a manager is that the manager is going to take off a lot of stress from you, so that you can have time to rest and also time to invest in other businesses. Because if you are into the taxi business, it means you are somebody who wants to build passive income real fast, and you're not going to end just with one taxi. You want to increase the number of taxis. You are not also going to end up owning a taxi business. Maybe you want to also run different kinds of business. So it's very important for you to have a manager who is going to manage all the stress, who is going to manage all the transactions, manage the drivers, manage the garage, and every other thing, because it's a very broad thing. Many people actually start the taxi business thinking that we just like put the driver inside the car and say go and look for money, and when in the evening the taxi driver comes back and hands money. That's not just how it goes. There are lots of things along the line. When looking for a manager, you need to look for somebody with good psychology, somebody with good communication skills, somebody with a good attitude, someone who have proven experience in management. Don't just look for anyone. Don't just look for somebody because it's a friend or it's a family member. Look for somebody who you can fire. If you can't fire him, you can't hire him. So always have that in mind. Don't look for somebody that when you fire, it becomes a personal problem. Another tip for looking for a manager is actually bringing someone who has a different cultural background from your team of drivers. There's a reason why the word diversity exists. It's not just for fancy. Someone from a different background can see possibilities where you won't even bother to look. Now, this is one of the few places where biology and economics have something in common. In biology, they always advise that people from different backgrounds should always intermarry, so that the children down the line benefit from some good traits. Now, the manager has several duties. One of them is to actually collecting money daily from the driver, depending on what contract you make. He's also responsible for providing you with weekly reports on how much money is spent and also how much money is gotten from the business. He's also responsible for ensuring that the taxi should spend the least amount of time possible at the level of the garage. He's also responsible for making sure that cost is reduced at every level. Now, you should make it crystal clear to your manager that the safe collection and deposit of your money from the driver is very important, and that the day that it stops, or that the day that the money doesn't come in, is the day that your contract actually stops. You should understand that very well, and that it should be crystal clear from the very beginning. You should also make sure that all your cars are repaired in a particular garage, and this should be well monitored and followed up by your manager. When choosing a manager, you should look for somebody who sees calculation as a hobby. You should look for somebody who is honest, somebody who has very good philosophy, somebody who is positive, somebody who is diligent, somebody who is punctual. Now, we're going to the next part of the video. How much is your taxi business going to cost? Now, in this section, we're going to discuss the expenditure, how much you're going to spend, and how much profit you are going to make from your taxi. Money you're going to spend starts at the level of your taxi. Depending on the state of the car, that is how new the car is. I will normally recommend cars that are newer. But now, depending on the state of the car, you should budget about $2,500 to about $8,000. Now, the cars that are more expensive, that's the $8,000 cars, are going to fetch you more money. I'm going to tell you how later on in the video. Generally, people have the tendency of buying very old cars, but these old cars just bring lots of disadvantages, since most of them don't really have good fuel efficiency. Now, another thing that is going to add to your expenses is actually insurance. Now, insurance can actually vary from country to country depending on many other aspects. In Cameroon, it's about $250 every 3 months. Another expense is actually going to go to the salary. Remember, you are paying the manager. Now, the manager's salary is about $100, but then that's just the basic salary. When you add each taxi to the fleet, you add an extra $50. So if you're adding 5 taxis, you multiply $50 by 5. Another expense is actually painting the taxi. Now, different countries require actually different colors. In Ghana, you have orange, usually at the wings of the taxi. In Nigeria, every state has its own color that is precise. In Cameroon, we have yellow. In South Africa, we have white. And in Ivory Coast, we have green. Adding all these expenditures up, we are going to come up with a total of about $3,500 and $8,500 for the two different categories of cars. Now let's talk about income. Now, the income generated greatly depends on the type of contract you sign with the driver. Now, there are three different types of contract that are very popular, do not use at the same scale. Now, the first kind of contract is the kind of contract where we say balance and carry. It's popularly known as balance and carry. In that contract, you kind of like, let's say you bought the taxi for about $3,000 and you tell the driver that since I bought this taxi for $3,000, I've paid insurance and I've done this. Or I'm selling this taxi back to you at $5,000, but you're going to pay monthly for 1 year. People work on a schedule where he pays a fixed amount of money every week, or let's say every month. It just depends on whatever works for you. Now, the next type of contract is actually the contract where you pay salary to the driver. This kind of contract is not really common in Africa because it's actually really dependent on the meta type of system, the system where you pay according to the kilometers you've covered. So this kind of system, we don't even recommend the system in Africa because people are not really used to this meta system in Africa. The next type of contract is the contract where on a daily basis, your driver gives you whatever he has worked for that day. That is, he hands this money to the manager and the manager later on gives the money to you. Now, in this type of contract, whatever problem the car has, if it's a tire puncture, if it's a brake problem or whatever, you as the owner of the car is going to take full charge of the responsibilities when it comes to payment at the level of the garage. So in the contract where the driver pays daily, in Cameroon, for example, the driver is required to give $20 on a daily basis. Now, if you multiply $20 on a daily basis, reducing 1 day, because usually in this contract, 1 day is not paid. That is, the driver has 1 day for himself. Meanwhile, you, the investor, you are going to have 6 days. So now, every day in a week, the driver gives you $20. At the end of the month, you are going to make $480 per taxi. So if you have 10 taxis, you multiply 480 by 10, and that's easily going to give you $4,800, which is actually decent money in Africa. I like to read that I know people who have 300 taxis and are managing it just fine. So you should not be afraid to scale up your business. So the last part of this video is actually how do we stand out? How do we make additional income? How can we outsmart other people in the taxi business? Now, what you need to actually do is to approach businesses. Now, these businesses usually want people to do adverts from them, and the taxi is just a very good avenue for that. They will give that. What they're going to do is they're going to give you stickers where you're going to put at the back of your seat or at the dashboard. So when passengers get into the car, they can easily read and understand what that company is doing. Most often, real estate companies usually take that advantage and sell pieces of land. It's actually a very effective way of doing advertisements. Taxis usually receive about $2 per day for this advertisement. If you're considering 30 days that this taxi is out there, you can easily make $60 just from adverts. And if you have 10 of them, that is about $600, which is not negligible. That can handle the salary of your manager with ease and even subsidize fuel. Another way that you can actually make lots of money, that you can actually stand out in the crowd and dominate other taxi owners, is that you can actually use those high-end cars, the cars we talked about, the newer cars, the cars that cost $8,000. You can actually use them to do VIP services. Now, to add value to these cars, you can add accessories. You can add other accessories like drinking water, snacks, and all that. Anything you can add to make the ride more comfortable. More to that, the most valuable thing you're going to offer to the passenger is actually a ride to their home or to their final destination. Now, these kind of customers are usually the bourgeoisies. They usually pay lots of money for their transport, and you know the amount of millionaires in Africa keep increasing every day. The middle class keep rising every day. Now, there's a very high demand for this particular kind of customers. Now, I'm saying this because the traditional way taxis work in Africa is that they drop their customers on the main road. So when you pick them from the point of departure to your target point, you're actually adding a lot of value, and you can actually put high prices to these services. I'm not be surprised that this model is going to be the most lucrative part. If you're not subscribed yet to the channel, please do subscribe. Also, make sure you hit the bell icon. If you're subscribed and you have not hit the bell icon, it makes no sense because you're not going to be informed whenever a new video comes up.